All right, folks, what's going on? So we are going to be going into our next application, and this one is a coin flip simulator. And the purpose for this coin flip simulator is to really start getting into the introduction of the random number generation that is behind App Inventor, as well as any computer programming. If you have ever played a video game, if you have ever jumped onto a site where you have to click on a button and maybe it assigns you a number, or it assigns you a word, or if you need to jump in and you get assigned into a queue because maybe there's too many people trying to log in at one time. Whatever the case may be, random number generation is applied in these aspects. And again, what it's doing, it's applying, it's grabbing a random number, it's giving you that value, and then that's the value or the place that you have. And then every number after that, you can stipulate to be greater than that value. So no different than actually when you're going to a deli counter at a supermarket, and you go up and you push the button and it spits out, a random number. Now, granted, it's consecutive, but again, you don't know what number you're going to get before going into there. So anyway, what we're going to do in this is, like I said, we're going to build a coin flip simulator, and the coin flip simulator will look something like this. So let me go to the link really quick. So the notes that I will post that I put together is going to be on Blackboard, and this right here is the link that you're going to want to just copy and paste. So you're just going to go into the PowerPoint or the PDF that I will post under the notes section, and then copy and paste this entire link right into your browser. And then when you copy and paste your link into your browser, it's going to open up your App Inventor. And the needed function is these two components right here. I mean, you can copy or cut and paste graphics if you want and do it on your own and get your own coin. But the media is the heads and the tails of the coin already made for you. So, all right, so to create this app, what I'm going to do, it's going to be very simplistic, and we're going to do a part 2, which is going to expand upon that. So for the user interface, all we're going to have is on our screen, we're going to come into our user interface here, we're going to grab an image, all right, and we're going to drop an image on the screen over here. And then directly below that, what we're going to do is we're going to have a button, and we're going to drop a button below that. So let's make some adjustments to these items here. So since the text for button 1 is already highlighted, let me rename this. Instead of button 1, we'll call this button coin. All right, and then what we're going to do on the right-hand side here under properties, we are going to go to our width, and we're going to choose a fill parent. And then we're going to leave the height as is. We don't need to have this big monster button on our screen. What I do want to, though, is change text for button 1. I want to get rid of that, and I just want to replace that with flip coin. All right, so that should take care of that piece. So now what I want to do is I want to adjust my image over here. And what I want to do is we're going to scale this to a certain pixel size. So let's just do, and let's see how this looks. We're going to do a 100 by 100. We might need to, we might need to fix that a little bit more, but we'll see. All right, and then what we're going to do initially is we're going to assign the picture heads and hit OK. If you want to do tails, that's fine. All right, so that, let's make that a little bit bigger because it's a little bit small. So let's go up to 150 pixels. All right, I think that'll be better when we change the width as well. All right, that's good enough for now. And what I want to do is I just want to justify this. So I'm going to hit screen, and then I'm going to go over here for the horizontal alignment, and I'm going to have a center alignment so the coin is nice in the center. Obviously, if we used arrangements or whatever, we wouldn't have to do that. We can just adjust it within the arrangement, but since we're not using arrangements right now, this is what we're going to do, though we will change that when we get to part 2. All right, so as far as the user interface is concerned, That's all I need. I don't need anything more. So what I want to have happen is when I click the flip the coin button, I want to generate a random number. And if a random number comes up, well then it should be heads. And if the other number comes up, it should be tails. And we're going to dynamically change the image when we get to that part. So I'm going to go into my blocks and I'm going to make edits to my code right now. So being that I'm using the random number generator, obviously what is going to fire this whole process off? Well, it's clicking that button. So I'm going to go into my button coin, and then I'm going to choose the when button coin.click, because when I click the button, I want all this stuff to the event to trigger and to have everything happen. All right, and so think of it this way. When you flip a coin, you know, it's all about odds. All right, so when you flip a coin, you have technically a 50-50 chance of either getting a heads or tails, because that's the number of sides you have. 2 sides, so therefore 50-50. 3 sides would be 33%, 4 sides would be 25%, and so on and so forth. So when you think about this, how are we going to assign values to this? Well, first thing I want to do is I want to go into variables and I want to click on this initialize global, because I want to assign a value to this. And rather than having the word name, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the word coin. And I want to assign an initial number, initial value to this coin. And so I'm just going to go under my math drawer, grab the 0, and then I'm going to substitute in there a value of 1. If you want to use 0, that's fine too. But I'm going to use the value of 1. And so what I want to do is I want to have to utilize my random number generation, so that when I randomly select a number, I want to set a parameter, all right? Because I could only have a 50-50 shot. That means you can either have one or the other. Or in this case, I can either have a number 1 or a number 2. All right, so those are the random integers that I want to kind of pick from. All right, so with that being said, what I am going to have in here is I'm going to go into my variables. I'm going to grab my set block, plug that in, and this obviously is my set coin. And then I want to set that to a random number that I'm going to generate. So if I go into my math tab, and I can come down here to this random integer block, I want to click on that, and I want to plug that into my variable here. But I want this random integer spread to be not from 1 to 100. I want it to be from 1 to 2. So that when I run this program, what it's going to do, it's either going to randomly generate number 1 or number 2. And so what I'm going to do is, if the number that's generated is a number 1, well then I'll assign that to heads. And if the number that is generated is 2, then I'll assign that to tails. And so as you can probably guess already, since I'm already saying the words if and else and everything, that's exactly what we need, and that's the direction we need to go. So if I go into my control, I'm going to grab my if then else block, all right, because I want to dictate or control exactly, how my program is going to behave. And in this case, if I show the heads picture or the tails picture based on the condition that's being met. So now I need to make sense of this. Well, how am I going to write this? Well, if the number generated is equal to 1, then I want to show the picture, I want it to be heads. Else, if it's not 1, then obviously it's 2, and therefore I want to show the picture tails. So because I'm storing this random number value into this variable global coin, what I'm going to do is that is what I'm going to set my condition on. I'm going to grab my equals block here and plug it in. Right, then I'm just going to mouse over my coin here. All right, I'm going to get the variable global coin, plug that in, and then I'm going to just duplicate this number 1 over here, and I'm going to plug that in here. All right, so if the value, so when I randomly generate, if I by happenstance generate a 1, I'm going to set this value to 1, and then when I get into here, if get global coin, so if 1 equals 1, well then that's true. Then what I want to do is I want to set the picture image to the heads. And so I want to change the image picture. So if I go under my image, all right, we have it right here, set image 1.picture. So I want to click on that, and then I want to plug that into my then block. All right, and then what I want to do, so this is where I know some of you may have asked this question when you were making your previous app about what how would you get it so that you can access different photos. And you just have to basically path it to the proper photo. And so what that means is that normally when you would be on a computer system, you'd have your C drive, and then you have the :/, and then you'd have the next drive, which could possibly be downloads, and then you have the word downloads, and then you have another /. So if there was another folder in the downloads file, say hello, you'd then type in hello, and then if there's a file in that folder, then you would have the file name with the extension after it. All right, so with App Inventor, because where the photos, App Inventor already knows, and actually this is, to be honest with you, the first time I'm testing it on iOS. In the Android platform, App Inventor already knows that the root of where all the photos are stored are being stored in either your photo library, if you're saving it there, or it already knows that because you're doing this virtually, it's being stored on the root drive within the cloud. So there is no extra pathing that you need to do. All that you need to do for this is you need to write the name of the file, and then the extension as well. But you have to be careful because the name has to be written specifically. And so to double check that, let me go back into my designer here. And yes, everything's lowercase. So I need to make sure that it's written, because if you do not have it written precisely, it's not going to path to the right photo. It'll see heads with a capital H as a different file than heads with a lowercase h. All right, so when I flip, if I randomly generate a 1, I want to make sure that my picture is showing heads. Otherwise, I want it to show tails. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control-click and duplicate this and plug this in. And rather than heads, I'm going to change this to tails. And then I need to go back and make sure that it's all lowercase. All right, so everything looks good on that end. So now what I can do is I can fire this up and I can test my program. So I'm going to go to my AI companion and I'm going to switch over onto my phone. And let's fire this up and let's see what this looks like. Then I'm going to switch over to my camera. All right, so there is my coin flip. All right, so when I hit flip coin, okay, we're still on heads. I hit coin again. All right, now we've generated a number 2, so therefore I'm on tails. I hit it again. We generated a 1, we're on heads. Generated another 1, we're on heads. Another 1, we're on heads. A 2, we're on tails. Back to a 1, we're on heads. All right, so we see that our app is working how it is supposed to. All right, so let me double check to see my timer here. All right, I'm only 12 minutes in. Good, so let me go back into App Inventor. All right, so I'm going to reset my connection. So and now what we're going to test, or what we're going to check out is, let's build upon this program. So we see that our generator is working, but what we don't know is exactly how well it's working. So we could see that, every time I hit the flip coin, all right, we're either getting a 1 or a 2, and I'm either getting heads or tails. But if you do that 100 times, then you're going to have to keep a manual log on, the side about how many heads and how many tails you have. And we want to try to prevent that. We want it to actually have the program do all of that for us. So at the click, of a button, we know exactly what we're dealing with here. And ultimately what we're trying to find out is how well the random number generator works with an App Inventor. All right, and the random number generation that you want to have when you write code for random number generation, you want to have as best as possible a 50% distribution. So if you run this 10 times, you want to get as close to 5 heads and 5 tails as possible. 100 times, 50 heads, 50 tails, and so on and so forth. All right, so I'm going to modify now my user interface. And rather than have the coin flip heads or tails, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to actually have some labels down here that are going to do all the wording for us. So with that being said, what first I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my layout and I want to grab a horizontal arrangement. All right, I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop that right on the top there. And what I'm going to have is, with this arrangement, I'm going to go over to width and I'm going to click on fill parent so it spans across. And then I'm just going to leave the side as such. The next thing I'm going to do inside this arrangement now is I'm going to grab my photo and I'm going to drop it inside my arrangement up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale that picture down. So rather than having 150 pixels, I'm going to reduce it to say maybe, oops, not 750, 75. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the width as well. And actually, I might have to even scale this down further, it looks like. Maybe even down to, oh no, okay, there we go, that's good. So I have my image scaled how it's supposed to be. The next thing I want to do is I want to grab a label. So I'm going to go to my user interface, grab a label, and then I'm going to drop that right next to my picture here. And what I want to do is, instead of text for label 1, I'm going to change that to say CoinFlip experiment. And I'm going to actually increase the size, the font size, instead of 24, because I want to get it nice and big. So let me try 28. That's a little too big, so let me drop that down just a little bit. Let me go to 26. There we go. So at least it fits within the confines of my space there. And rather than, because I'm going to have a few labels in this, I want to change that. So rather than calling it label 1, I'm going to rename that, and I'm just going to call it label title. So I know that that's the title. All right, so that is set for that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop another, go back into my layouts here. I'm going to grab another horizontal arrangement, and I'm going to drop that below the other horizontal arrangement that I just did. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the width, and I'm going to do a fill parent on the width so it spans across. And then inside this arrangement, I'm going to have a few things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a label in this first area. All right. And I'm going to change the name of this label to, I'm going to call it label N, because N is going to be the number of times you roll heads or tails. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to change text for label 1. I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm just going to have an N colon and put a space there. All right, so we have that. So next to the N, what I'm going to do, and I'll explain that in a second, I'm going to go and grab a text box down here, and I'm going to drop that right next to the N. All right, and so rather than calling it text box 1, I'm going to rename that to text box N. And then what I want to do on this side over here is I want to look down here specifically where it says numbers only. And I want to click on that because I want to prevent any other symbols or letters to be put in there. I want only a number to be placed in there, and that's what this N stands for. N means the number value that we're dealing with. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flip coin, and then I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop it and plop it right in next to my text box here. All right, and because I already changed the flip coin, I don't have to change the name of that. That one is good to go. And the last thing I would need to do now is I'm going to go grab another label, and I'm going to drop it in the bottom here. So what I'm going to have to do now, because this is what I did last in part 1, I changed the alignment here. So I want to go back to alignment, and I want to click back on the left. So we're dealing with the left alignment so that the label, this label is all the way to the left over here. And then what I want to do is I want to change the name of label 1, and I'm going to call this label results. And then on the actually, I mean, I'm going to dynamically change this in the code, so I technically don't need to edit this. But if you want, so that it doesn't say text for label 1 when you start up the program, we can just kind of get rid of that and leave it as such. All right, so we have our new user interface here. So ultimately what I want to do is I want to type in the number 10 and hit flip coin. And what this is going to do is going to iterate through the coin flip experiment 10 times, and it's going to display how many heads and how many tails that we were able to flip here. You do 100, you do 1,000, whatever the case may be. It's then going to run through, and it's going to display how many times we've had that information. Okay, so now that that is good, I'm going to go over to my blocks area and let me retrofit this. Now, normally, and I should have mentioned this, so I do apologize for not saying it sooner, but normally when we do this, because we modified the first part, and I'm not going to use the first part ever again, which is why I didn't save off, but normally when you modify a program to this extent, before we started changing this user interface, we should have gone over here to my project and do a save project as. So we would have then changed or saved off the old version, and then we could then continue on in the new direction with the new version. I didn't do that because I don't need to, and we're not going to be using that older code. So, you know, this is the one that we're going to be more concerned with. So if you didn't save off, don't worry about it. We can still run forward with this. Okay, so we need to now modify this code over here so that it makes sense to the new experiment that we're going to be running. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, again, the button click.go is going to drive everything like such. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull all this out because some of that's going to change, some of it will stay. So we're going to keep, obviously, the one button.click. We're also going to keep the initial global coin because, again, the 1 and the 2 stays the same, whether if we have heads or tails. So I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to create 2 new variables here. So I'm going to grab 2 of the, I'm just going to grab initial variable, and I'm going to change this one, to n. All right, and I want to set the value to n to 0. And again, the n means how many times am I going to have to flip the coin. And then let me control click and duplicate this. And then I want to change this variable to heads. And I want to get rid of that first capital N because I want the first n to be lowercase. So this is going to then determine how many times that I flip the coin so that heads displayed on the coin. All right, so now with these variables, and because we're calling these all throughout the program, that's the reason why we didn't use local variables. We're using global variables. So I need to keep those as a global. All right, so again, the first thing I want to do is I need to, we input the number of how many times I'm going to flip the coin here. All right, so I need to make sure that I account for that. So I'm going to go under my variables, and I want to go to set, plug that in, and I want to set that to n because I want to then determine what is that number that I input in that text field. So I'm going to go under my text box here, all right, and then there should be a .text get feature, which is right here, text box and .get, .text. So I'm going to use that and plug that in there. And so what this is going to do, this is going to get the value that I just typed into that text box on page 1. And excuse me one second, I just want to double check. I lost. All right, well, hopefully we'll make this under 30 minutes. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to set my, get my global N. There we go. Mouse over that, and I want to get the set feature for my global N heads. And just to make sure that, you know, we are setting it appropriately, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm also going to set this to 0. Because I want to make sure that that value holds true and that nothing gets changed along the way. So every time I click this button, we're not using the same value from the previous click. We're brand new. We're starting from scratch, starting from 0 all over again. So now what I'm going to do is, rather than writing code over and over and over again, this is where your loops come into play. And I'm going to use the for loop. And I'm going to grab this for each number, and I'm going to plug that in next. And so what I want to have here is I always want to start with the number 1, right? But what am I going to count to? Well, I'm going to count to the number that I input into that text box here, which is my global N. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this get global N, and I'm going to plug that into the to field. So if I plug in 10, well, then this is going to count from 1 to 10. If I plug in 100, this is going to count from 1 to 100. All right, so that's how we are going to dynamically change this process. And every time I flip a coin, I want to increment by 1. All right, I want to increment by more than that, because if I plug in the number 100, I want to make sure that I'm flipping 100 times. So every time I increment by 1, it's a new flip. So what am I going to do when this process happens? Well, what I'm going to do is I want to grab this, And so I want to set my global coin to some random integer, either number 1 or number 2. And then what am I going to do? Well, then if the global coin is equal to 1, then what I want to do is I want to assign set global heads, all right, to the variable global n heads plus 1. All right, because again, I'm starting at 0 here, and this is basically every time I click on a 1. Actually, let me do this out first, and then I'll explain the methodology behind this. So I want to grab a plus block from here, plug that in, put in global n heads here, and then I'm just going to duplicate this number 1, and then this is going to plug in. All right, so what this is doing is that I'm setting the variable global n heads to the current value, which is 0, plus 1. So what we're doing here is we're counting how many times the value of heads is showing up. All right, that's the whole purpose behind that. And then lastly, what we need to do is now we need to set the label results to make it display what we have. So I need to go under here, and I need to go to label results. And then I want to go to label results.text, and I want to plug that in at the bottom over here. All right, and so what do I want it to say? Well, I'm going to go under text, and this is where we've used this feature already, this join feature. And what I want to have is heads, and then the number, and then tails, and then the number. So I need 4 inputs to display in my label here. So I got to click on that little blue cogwheel and drag 2 more of these strings over, so I now have 4 inputs available. And then what I want to do is I want to have 2 areas that are going to be text. So I'm just going to duplicate this twice. Okay, and then in the first one here, I'm going to have the word heads with a colon and a space. And then down here, I'm going to have the word tails with a colon and a space. All right, and so then what I'm going to do now is I want to then grab the value, right-click on this, oops, Control-click to duplicate. So I'm going to plug in the value global n heads here. And then all I'm going to do, so to avoid having to do an if-then-else here, because I'm only dealing with 2 things, if the global n heads represents the heads, well then the total number of flips minus how many times heads show up is basically the remainder, which would then have to be the tails. So I'm going to create a little mathematical equation in here, and I'm going to grab the minus block. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the value for get global n and plug it in here. And then I want to get the value of global n heads and plug it in here. And so when I flip, all right, for however many number 1s show up, it's going to save in global n heads, which is going to show here. And then the tails is basically the number of flips minus how many heads have popped up. So if I flip the coin 100 times, all right, there's my 100 right here. And if heads pops up 49 times, well, then it'll display heads 49, and then tails would be 100 minus 49, which should equal 51. All right, so this, and then actually in this over here, we don't even need. So let me take this and let me just trash this. So let me fire this up, and let me see how this works out. All right, so I definitely have some pathing or... All right, so let me go to my camera. So I already tried it once. All right, I plugged in 100, all right, and it tells me that I have 51 heads, 49 tails, and there's probably some extra separation I can do here. If I switch this over into 1,000 and I flip the coin, okay, we got 511 tails, heads, 489 tails. If I go back to 100, all right, I got 4753. I can go down to 10 if I want. Right, 3 and 7. So that's obviously a very bad ratio. But as you can see, when I stretch it out and do a greater number, look at that, it's perfect, 500 to 500. So it definitely has struggles a little bit with lower numbers, but it works well with higher numbers. And like I said, I would have to change the font, or I'm gonna have to change the scaling of this. But again, the whole purpose behind this app is to show you that random number generation does work very well when the end value increases. And honestly, all random number generators do not work well when you're dealing with low numbers, right? Because it is just, so it's very common that you can have a spread like 7 and 3, like you just saw there. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to build upon this on the next video moving forward. All right, have a great day, folks.